Dad picked the bicycles up on in New York City and brought them home on the train.
Uh-huh.
Of course, you never wore helmets. But whenever I get on the Bianchi, I say, "Oh, this is fast. This is fast."
Welcome to Tell Me About Your Bike, the podcast about the meaning of life, the universe, and bicycling. I'm your host, Wesley Cheney. This episode is in memory of my father, Reverend Henry Ellsworth Cheney. He taught me to ride a bike and took me on many rides around Vermont. He recently died tending the garden he loved. When I first began this podcast, I had a vague idea that I wanted to tell stories about bikes. I didn't even have a name for my podcast then. And on a rainy, cold, wintry day, I sat down with my dad in his RV in a flooded campground on the edge of the Great Dismal Swamp and asked him about his first bike, his favorite bike, and where he liked to ride. So listen now to another episode of Tell Me About Your Bike. Here we go. Okay, so, Dad, let's start with your name.
My name is Hank Cheney.
Okay, and tell me what you had for breakfast this morning.
I had 2 boiled eggs, English muffin, fruit, and coffee.
Sounds good. So, all right. Tell me about your first bike.
The first bicycle I had was a 26-inch single-speed Schwinn bicycle.
Okay.
That had been my brother's first bike previously.
Uh-huh.
And my father felt that we should learn to ride full-size bicycles.
Okay.
So in 2nd grade, I started trying to ride that great big bicycle.
Uh-huh.
In order to ride it, I had to take it down to the corner and climb up on a rock that was about a foot tall.
Uh-huh.
And then climb onto the bicycle. And I had many, many accidents learning to ride that thing.
I bet you did.
Because I was in 2nd grade.
And it was that would have been a big bike.
It was a full-sized bicycle.
Jeez.
When I was in 3rd grade, I got the 3-speed Schwinn bicycle that you rode also.
I remember it.
Yep. And my brother had gotten a similar bicycle a few years before that. I still remember that Dad picked the bicycles up on the New York City and brought them home on the train.
Uh-huh.
And the first sight that you would have of your new bicycle was in the luggage car of the train.
Oh, jeez.
And we went to Suffern. It came to Suffern, which was about 5 miles from home.
Uh-huh.
And I insisted that I was going to ride it home.
Okay.
And they let me ride it about 3 miles. Family insisted that I had to get off it. My brother would rest home.
Oh, well, your brother must have been happy with that.
Well, yes, I think he. And I was sure that I could finish the job.
I'm sure. I'm sure you would have been positive you could finish the job.
But my first bicycle was that great big heavy Schwinn. A neighbor, people that lived behind us, his sister had a 20-inch girl's bicycle.
Uh-huh.
I can remember at the same time I'd go over to Chapin's. I would ride that bicycle very, very happily.
Right.
Because it fit me.
Right.
And then about the same time, my sister given a 24-inch girl's bicycle by a family that was moving away. And I would ride that bicycle, anything to avoid the 26 one that was just too big.
So how long did it take before you grew into it?
Well, I can remember riding it when I was 5th grade,
Okay.
riding it to school. And I was riding the other one at the same time, the one that came home on the train.
Mm-hmm.
And the frame on that one was even a bit bigger.
Okay.
Because it was a 3-speed English bicycle. The frame on that one was even a bit bigger.
Right.
I had, I still have one chipped tooth.
Right.
Because I riding in front of the house, house was up on a hill and the lawn sloped down to the road.
Uh-huh.
My mother was watching outside, saw me fly over the handlebars and land on my face.
Oh no.
Yep. But that was, and as you know, I had that bicycle for many, many years, and you rode it too.
Yeah, I rode it when I was in my teens as well. It was a big bike.
And it had a speedometer on it.
Yeah, a mechanical speedometer. I remember
And
that.
one of the things that the kids used to try to do is there were big long hill. Actually, it came down and it leveled out, and then it went down a steeper section.
Mm-hmm.
And so you take it up to the top of Miller Road, and it was probably about at least half a mile down through there.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that you were dared to do was to get your bicycle up to 50 miles an hour.
That sounds like fun.
Yes, I remember.
That.
I remember I got it up to 50 miles an hour. You rode it after that, and it still had the mechanical speedometer.
Yeah.
In Franklin, I remember you came back to the cottage and said you couldn't believe that I ever rode that bicycle 50 miles an hour.
That bike, I wouldn't want. I don't think it could get up to 50 anymore because you haven't greased those bearings in decades.
Well, it went to the junkyard anyway. I gave it away to Auntie Ruth's grandson.
Okay.
And
wow.
so it probably was never ridden again. But I used to oil it, and in the front hub there was a sleeve that you could move, and you could put oil in there.
Yeah, I remember that.
And there was a similar one for the rear hub too. So I used to oil those.
Yeah. It would be I wouldn't want to get 50 miles an hour on it. At least not by the time it was in Franklin. Maybe when it was 30 years younger, it would have been a better bike.
It was pretty frightening that day. I only did it the once.
Yeah.
I only survived it once. Of course, you never wore helmets.
No, of course not. Of course not.
Helmets were unheard of. I never got a bicycle helmet until I was, probably 35, 40.
Right. That would have been when we all got them in Springfield.
Was it about then? Yeah, probably was.
Probably
and
88 or so.
And I was, I think I'd gotten one before the rest of the family got them.
I think you're right.
My cousin Richard, who's about 7 years older, was riding his bicycle around UVM and had on a helmet. Mm-hmm. And he woke up a couple days later in ICU. He'd had an accident, serious head injury.
Oh, jeez.
And so my father made me promise that I would get a helmet and wear it. So I did after that. I got a helmet.
I vaguely remember that. Yeah.
Now, of course, when we were living in Pittsford, Vermont, north of Rutland,
right,
it was 10 miles up to Brandon.
Right.
And I was riding back and forth periodically between the two churches on my bicycle.
Right.
Up Route 7, which was a busy road.
Yeah.
With no shoulders. You just rode on the edge of the road.
Right.
And my parents were not happy about that. Mm-hmm. And so then Mom was commuting into Rutland for her master's, and we had one car. And so we figured that we could put together the money to buy a secondhand motorcycle, and I could use that for transportation.
I remember the pictures of that when that came home.
Yeah. Well, my parents caught wind of that, and my father calls up on the phone, well, you aren't going to ride a motorcycle. And so I said, would you prefer that I commuted up and down Route 7 on the bicycle? That ended that conversation right there. But And so, of course, I wore a helmet with the motorcycle.
Right.
And now at 73 years of age, when I renewed my driver's license about a month ago, I gave up the motorcycle endorsement.
Oh, no.
Because I figured I was never going to ride a motorcycle again.
Chances are you're probably not. Yeah, that's the...
And of course, your older brother, Calvin, you can't do that. You can't ride a motorcycle.
Right, I'm sure he had that to tell you.
Yep. So, but I've had a lot of good times riding bicycles over.
Yeah, and so where did you get the CCMs? I remember those two yellow.
Oh, well, no, Mom had a yellow Schwinn.
You had the purple CCM?
I had a purple CCM, and we bought those when we were living in Bristol, and it was in Bristol where you were born, and so
those were the 10 speeds.
They were 10 speeds, and then Mom's yellow Schwinn was a woman's bicycle, the way they made women's bicycles at the time, which just had a full-length frame, but they just did a drop bar on them. So never fit her well, and it was a heavy thing.
I remember that.
And my CCM was a good bicycle for its time.
Yeah, it was.
And before we made our first major bike Virginia trip,
right,
you and Wesley and Mom all had new bicycles.
Right.
And we sent mine to be rebuilt, and I got and it was converted to a 15-speed bike or a 21-speed.
Okay. Yeah, probably 15 because you had 10, you had 5 on the back and 2 on the front. So you probably would have changed
3 on the front.
You would have changed the 3 in the front and 5 in the back, so it would have been 15. That makes sense.
I don't think we changed the rear sprockets. I think we just changed the drivetrain. So that was a major, and that was what we did on mine before that trip.
That makes sense. Yeah, especially for Bike Virginia because there was so many hills. Having a granny gear on the front to climb would make a big difference.
Yep. So that was, and that one we had until we were in Montpelier, and I bought the Bianchi.
Right.
I put that one into a used bicycle consignment sale, and they sold it.
Well,
someone bought it for $40 or $50.
Hey, it's still a good bike. I'm sure it was someone still got a lot of miles out of it.
Maybe someone did.
I hope so. It was a beautiful bike. And so, what bike are you riding now?
Well, I have 2. Mm-hmm. I have the Bianchi touring bicycle, and then I have the mountain bicycle. What brand is that mountain bicycle? Oh, it's a Marin.
Marin, yeah.
It's a Marin. And that one I bought that one at off Craigslist because I had the hybrid, and actually the Bianchi did too. The 2 of them fell off the roof racks within a year of each other.
Right.
But the Bianchi, the front fork got broken, but I was able to get a new fork put on it. So that one I still use, but the other one you got and you cut up for scrap and stuff. But,
I used it to build other bikes, I think.
But it was that one, the frame got cracked. And so that was when I was riding bicycle then for rehab after my heart surgery.
Right.
And we were on our way to work in Salem, Maine when it fell off the roof. And so I found this Marin on Craigslist over there in Maine, and that one has worked out very well. But I did have, I had a longer seat tube put on it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I was using that for some other rehab work on rollers, and it slipped out of the rollers. Got a little damage to the back, but they were able to fix it. I guess it needed to have a new rear derailleur.
Okay.
From that incident.
Well, that's not too bad.
No. But they also said that that I had the seat that the seat post was too short for me.
Oh, that probably made it a lot better.
And both of them, as you may remember, I used the Frogs clipless pedals on both of them.
Yeah, I do remember the Frogs, which I tried Frogs, and I just never, they didn't work for me the way they did for you.
Well, and of course, you and Bradford were around when we were ordering the Bianchi, and the guy in Burlington that was working with us had done some racing and stuff, and he had also had knee problems and was recommending the Frogs, and two of you were very excited that I was getting them because you figured that I would never adapt to them, and one of you was going to get those pedals.
It seemed like it seemed like it would work that way. It didn't,
but they did. And when Mom and I were doing the Erie Canal bike ride, and I was using the all-terrain bike,
right?
One of the Frogs broke somewhere out in New York,
right?
And so I got a set of SPD pedals. That was all I could get. Picked them up at a local shop out there.
Yeah.
And tried using those, but they did not work well for me because I didn't get enough swivel.
Right. You had the spring with that tension in there that was always setting you back to 0 point.
Well, it just did not work for me. So Mom has SPD pedals on her two bicycles, that pair and another pair. They absolutely were wrong.
Right.
But that fellow that fitted me out with the Frogs, gave us good advice at the time. Frogs were good.
Yeah.
Now, currently, I ride the mountain bicycle primarily around town.
Right.
I have about a 15-mile route that I work up to around St. Johnsbury, which includes going up and down some good hills. Mm-hmm. And then after I've trained and ridden a good bit, usually about into July, I can start riding the Bianchi again. But because that's geared higher, so it's harder, more challenging to pedal it. So
right.
But whenever I get on the Bianchi, I say, "Oh, this is fast. Right. This is fast."
It is. It's a beautiful fast bike.
And on the mountain bike, of course, I have slicks. Right. I don't ride on the knobbies.
Right. Well, that's okay. I mean, that gets you. That's what I was riding on today on the trails was slicks.
Now, the mountain bike, it was funny. We got it over there in Salem, Maine, or we went somewhere else to pick it up. But right after we'd gotten it, I rode into town, which was 6 or 8 miles, and we were doing a Nomads project, and the fellow that was the leader of the Nomads project, nice guy, I saw him in town, and so I said, that you need to remember that this is now in probably June, and I'd had the heart surgery in January.
Right.
And I was still rehabbing from the heart surgery.
Right.
And when I've been riding into town that day, I was having some chest pain.
Right.
And so I said, "Are you going back to Salem shortly?" He says, "Well, in a while." I said, he had a pickup truck. I said, "When you're coming back, if you see me on the road, would you pick me up, please?" He said, "Okay, I will."
Right.
And I didn't tell him what was going on.
Yeah.
Well, then I went into a store and I bought some aspirin. Because aspirin is good if you're having heart problems.
Right.
And so I took a couple aspirin, and I started riding back. And I got back to where we stayed, and he hadn't come and picked me up. He hadn't passed me.
Right.
And when he got back, he says, "Well, I didn't see you." And I even went back into town. He came back a second time. I said, "Well, I made it back." He said, "Oh, okay." And then I told him what was going on. That I was having chest pains.
Oh, that's great.
He was wild. But, the miracle is that we need to remember that it's been 7 years since I had that heart surgery, and I've been fine ever since.
You've been doing great. Yeah.
And while I may be almost 73 years old, I'm still riding bicycles.
Right.
And That I think, and well, no, I don't go out and ride 40 miles anymore.
Yeah.
But I can ride 20 miles pretty consistently.
I think if you put your mind to it and you trained for it, and you didn't have any health issues, I don't think you'd have any problem doing a 40.
No, I think I could. As long as it didn't have too many mountain crossings in it.
Yeah, and it might take you a little longer to recover from it, but just you could still do it. I've known guys who rode the Boston who were in their 80s. So
yes, I remember seeing some of them. Now, we, as you may or may not remember, we had a Nordic track rowing machine in the house.
Yeah, I vaguely remember that.
Well, it got destroyed when the house flooded 5 years ago.
Right.
The Nordic track weight machine survived the trip with water, but that one didn't.
Right.
And so, about 6 weeks ago, about 3 months ago, I started saying, I think I'd like to try using another rowing machine. I had, when I was rehabbing after my double hip replacement, and after my heart episode, I was using a Concept 2 rowing machine.
Right.
And so I researched, and people were saying that the Concept 2s were excellent. And the Concept 2, if you buy one from them, you have 30 days that you can return it for a full refund.
Okay.
And if you buy it, and their factory is just in Morrisville, which is 40 miles, less than that from the house. Oh, that's great. And if you buy one from the factory, they have some reconditioned ones that are like $150 less. So we went over there and we picked up the Concept 2.
Very cool.
And I've been using that pretty consistently. And they have they send out what's called workouts of the day every day. There's
right.
And so I use the medium workout of the day pretty consistently.
Oh, cool.
Although when Christmas came along, I didn't. And people don't believe this, but I'm rowing like 7,000 meters pretty consistently on that thing.
That sounds pretty awesome.
7,000 meters in about 40 minutes.
That sounds pretty cool.
And I don't use the lightest tension on it either.
Okay.
So that and then to encourage me to keep pumping, we got a television put in downstairs. So
good.
I ride and I look at the TV on the wall.
Oh, good. Oh, that's cool.
And I figure that after doing that, when spring comes, I'll be able to ride the bicycle again on the road. I picked up on the side of the road a good set of rollers. And I put the bicycle on. That wasn't the same set that I had the best of the other bike up with, but I put it on it, put the mountain bike on it last year, but I didn't like the rollers.
No, I don't blame you.
They were menorahs and they fold up, and I didn't like them.
That's okay. Oh, cool.
And I still cross country ski, although I've only been out once this year, but that's partly because we didn't have snow.
Right.
And then when even after we'd gotten some snow, I was still moving firewood.
Right. Well, that's a workout in and of itself.
Yeah, it is. When you try to move a cord of firewood 150 feet up the hill to the front of the house, and then put a cord into the basement, pretty consistent. Yeah, that when I'm moving firewood, that's a workout. When we get home from this trip, I need to fill up my firewood again. We have a friend, Paul, who will help me with the firewood too. The firewood's a workout, but I look forward to getting back on the bicycle. The the Bianchi, it's a nice bicycle, but it's an old. Of course, now it's 20 years old, probably.
Right.
At least. Is that going dead?
No, I had to reset it because we skipped over, so I lost a little bit about the last thing on the Bianchi, but that's okay.
Yeah,
We got what's
Bianchi,
fit
as
in
I
there.
say, it's a good. I think it was a very good bike, and
Right.
but it's probably we've been in St. J for 20 years, and so probably 25 years old now.
It's a great bike, and it's got Campagnolo on it. It's a beautiful bike. I love the color of it.
Well, the fork isn't the original color. The black fork, the replacement.
Right. Well, that's okay. It still looks sharp.
Mom and we've done some long rides on it. We did a long multiple sclerosis MS bike ride.
Right.
Now, when you and I did the MS, I think I was riding the CCM.
I think so. Yeah. And it was 275-mile days.
It
It's
was.
the MS 150, 275-mile days.
And you had strict instructions from Mother that you were to stay with me.
Yeah. She didn't want me barreling down the mountains at 50 miles per hour.
And I remember the second day, it was hot.
Yep.
And we were going up the Champlain Valley, and I was drafting you. You know what drafting is, Kelvin? Drafting is when you ride close behind the rider in front of you, and so they break the wind so you can keep going. And so your dad was having to hold back his speed so I could draft him and get through the ride.
Yeah, well, it was a long, hot day. I remember that.
It was a long, hot day. And Nana and Calvin, your Uncle Calvin, and your Uncle Brad, they were driving SAG for that ride.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a lot of fun. I can remember getting rid of that T-shirt after it was faded and stained and ripped, and finally got rid of that MS 150 T-shirt. So
Mom and I did the MS bike ride 2 or 3 years after that, but we didn't elect to do the 75. We did the 40.
That's still a pretty good ride. I don't blame you for doing that one.
Of course, you need to remember that your mother and I have done 2 100-mile centuries.
Yeah, that's been fantastic. I that's pretty amazing as well.
Twice we rode with groups from Boston to Provincetown.
That is pretty amazing.
I think they still do that ride, too.
I think so.
I'd like to do it again.
Yeah, it might be better nowadays now because there's probably more trails. So you probably have to spend less time on the road.
That's true. That's true, yeah. When we did the MS bike ride the second time, I had the CCM. I mean, the Bianchi.
Right.
I did that on the Bianchi. But when both times we did the Boston ride, Boston to Provincetown, I did that on the all-terrain.
Oh, cool. All right. Well, thanks for sitting down and talking, Dad. I appreciate it.
Okay.
I love the stories. All right. And that will conclude this episode of Tell Me About Your Bike.
So thanks for listening to my interview with my dad from 2019. Be sure to subscribe to Tell Me About Your Bike so I don't miss the next episode, when I'll be featuring a rolling interview in Charleston, West Virginia, with a local cyclist along the banks of the Kanawha River. Keep the rubber side down and keep riding. Cheers, y'all.